Nation, happy Thursday. Whoo, man, this week is flying by. Happy Thursday. Thursday is public facing day for me. So today is the day I put my extrovert hat on and beat the drum and spread the message and try to change lives. So we're doing it through content. I'm doing a whole bunch of interviews and podcasts and hangouts. And so this is actually my break where I'm flipping the switch. I'm being interviewed all day, but I'm actually going to do an interview today that you guys are going to learn a lot from. If you want to learn how to make money, raise money for your big idea, the world, you need to learn from this man who we're going to bring in here.
Hey, Evan.
Alex.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
How first off, how is everything going with the fires and everything where you're at? It sounds crazy.
It's pretty wild. I mean, the smoke smell is just like invasive. You can't get away from it. And it's not as bad in LA as it is in Northern California. I was born in San Francisco, and the photos yesterday were pretty insane.
My sister lives just outside, and yeah, she's like at noon. It feels like it's midnight.
Yeah.
Anyway, people need people like you to invest in all these great ideas to make the world a better place, man.
I mean, that's where the biggest opportunity is, honestly. There are so many companies that are now trying to disrupt industries that can create a positive impact on the future. And if you can make money and create a positive impact, there's no better situation, right?
So if you guys don't know, this is Alex. He's from a company called AGO Partners that he founded or co-founded. That's a venture capital firm it's like the venture capital firm with a heart. You know, I don't know how else you would describe it, but basically try to invest in companies who aren't just trying to make a buck. Obviously that's important, but trying to make the world a better place. And he's personally invested over $60 million in different businesses, and thought I'd pick your brain today on kind of what it takes for entrepreneurs to raise money from a VC, because a lot of people they feel like they've got a great idea. They feel like they, want to make the world a better place, but they don't have the resources, the team, the capital to do it. Just as a starting point, what advice you give to somebody who feels like they've got that great idea, but not the money to do it?
I mean, honestly, it's about dedication to what you're doing, your mission. There's a lot of founders that we've met with over the years that haven't had the same passion. And the companies that we ended up investing in were with founders that were obsessive, that wanted to make this work. We're going to put everything in their heart to make sure that they would accomplish their mission statement. And I think that there are a lot of founders out there that, yeah, sure, they're obsessive with their business, but they don't take everything that they can do to make sure that they win. And there's a lot of tough times. I mean, it's very hard raising capital, even from the venture standpoint. Like, it's never easy to raise a fund. And especially when you start out early in your career, you don't have a track record either of building a company or building a fund and raising capital and making good investments, that it's really hard out there. So it's really about kind of the obsessiveness of your idea and what you're wanting to accomplish. I think that's the thing that always kind of sparks me when I look at a company and a founder is like, how much do you want this? Like, you're not going to let anything stop you. And our best investments have been with founders that have been obsessive in that way.
I love it. What do you think the biggest mistake is people make when they're pitching a VC?
Arrogance.
Okay.
Silicon Valley, a lot of the companies now have been, they've been able to raise a lot of capital quite easily, and they tend to kind of overvalue themselves. And I think you never know what's going to happen in the world. And I think COVID's a perfect example of something that no one saw really coming. And some companies weren't prepared to weather that storm. And if you were priced too high and you had to do a down round, or you just didn't have the right capital structure set up, you could get pretty beat up. I mean, we're lucky that COVID was such a short sort of effect in finance, but who knows what's going to happen down the road. So I think that's where you really have to be prepared for what's going to happen down the road. And if it's raising capital, be open-minded to different prices, different valuations, different types of investors, and not just be focused at one thing.
Right. Well, and feedback too, right? I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure you like you don't want to run the company, but you want to invest in somebody who will listen to your perspective on what changes they might need to make.
Of course. I mean, that takes some leadership from the VC itself, but also you want the founder to have his path and really know what he wants to create. And you can be there to support if it's, making introductions to other VC funds, or, spending a lot of time with them and trying to help them figure out what path and how to get liquidity down the road. But, again, the best companies we've invested in, the founders knew what they needed to do to be successful. We were just able to help them with capital and help them guide them along. But we were able to pick some really good winners and from the leadership of the team in those companies.
How often do you have to replace the founder? Where like they stay in the business, it's just CEO isn't the right role for them.
It happens, especially as companies grow and scale at to a very, very high level and end up going public. Some CEOs aren't meant to be public CEOs. And a lot of the founders recognize that, and they kind of take themselves out of the business at a certain point. So it really is dependent on the founders. I mean, if you look, there's a lot of companies that are still that are publicly traded today that were venture backed, and the CEO is still there, and he's been able to execute on a high level. I think it really depends on each founder. I've been around so many different ones that it's hard to have any sort of like across the line story for that. But I think most CEOs of from venture companies are open-minded to being pulled out. I mean, I think most of them want to stay there, but I think they want the best for the business, and whatever takes that path is the most important.
Well, and also I guess the awareness to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be the person running this. That's something I mean, I used to be in the VC world way back, and that was something that was a challenge sometimes. Like, hey, you could be a great CTO, but you don't have the leadership skills to actually take this to where it needs to go, and just kind of humble pie, because they might have built this thing for 3 years and it's their baby and they don't want to give it up to somebody else.
Yeah, but it's really about leadership, right? For me, is like if you're a great CEO, you can build a team around you. It's not just your show. It's the ability to be able to hire people, bring in the right team, and create an environment that people want to work at and want to succeed at. And some CEOs can do that with a small team, but as the business scales, suddenly they have a lot more difficulty being able to kind of rein in the team and make sure everyone's productive. And I think that age used to be a thing that's very different now. A lot of these companies had very young CEOs and would go out to meet investors, and people would look at them like, oh, you're like 22 years old. What do you know? But I think that landscape has changed drastically over the last decade. I mean, since I started my fund when I was 22. I'm 32 now. And it's a very different world out there. I mean, most of the people I'm meeting with, founders, are younger than me.
Yeah. How is that for you, being a 22-year-old saying, I'm going to start a fund?
Well, I got lucky. My business partner, Joe Sandberg, came from like a deep financial background. He was at Blackstone and Tiger Global. So he brought a lot of legitimacy to me early on in my career, which is very important. I mean, you can't just like wake up one morning and decide you want to invest. I mean, even if you have unlimited capital at your disposal, people still will want partnerships with people that actually know what they're doing and have the ability to help scale your business. So yeah, I mean, definitely at the beginning, I used to get like, people look at me, oh, who are you? Like, what do you think you're doing? And I was like, well, this is the way it is. I want to build something, and I'd love to be involved in your business. And people took bets on me early on in my career. I mean, my biggest investors took big bets on me, and they continue to do so.
So what are some of the criteria you look at? You're going to invest into a company, the financial requirements, as well as you said the personality traits of just like being dedicated. Yes.
Yeah.
But so for the financial requirements, and also what does it mean to do good for the world to qualify to get in?
I mean, it really depends what stage we're investing at. In a seed or Series A stage, like we did in our first few funds, you're really betting on the person and the idea. I mean, I think addressable market size was a big thing for us early on. Like, can this business serve a massive market? But as you get in later stages, obviously financials get into the picture. We like to focus more on profitability. A lot of venture funds don't really care about profitability. They just care about growth. And we want to invest in companies that have a path to profitability and not just be like, oh, we're going to grow for 10 years and we'll figure it out at some point. We really care about that.
So how quick do they have to start making money? Profits?
I mean, again, it depends so much on the business, but I'd like to see it in the first couple of years, at least that they have a clear path outside of spend on marketing. Because if you take marketing out, companies can be profitable a lot faster, but you got to ramp up, and people want to see results. And sorry, go.
No, are you taking people with a concept, or are you taking people who've already gotten some angel funding and took it to a certain level? Where are you coming in?
I mean, we've done both. I mean, our biggest investment is this neobank called Aspiration, which is a social mission-driven online bank. And we've grown the business from day one. It started out of our office in LA, and now they have 200 employees. They're a standalone business. They've raised a couple $100 million of venture capital money. So in that case, we helped that from day one. In other cases, we were a lot more passive and weren't as involved and kind of just thought that it was a good idea, like the founder, and then backed them.
Yeah.
And then other companies, we've really taken a deep dive.
I saw that on the website, and I was curious, what would you call a neo bank?
It's an online bank. I mean, it's so there's the banking space has kind of changed over the last 4 or 5 years. You have companies like Chime, you have companies like Aspiration that were originally marketing layers on top of existing banking structure. So they don't actually own their debits. They don't actually own the accounts. It's more of just a layer on top where they get debit card fees and different ways to capitalize on that. But it's more of like how big of a business can you get this to? Where Aspiration, they actually own their whole entire core, so they own the customers. Their cash management account, which is similar to Merrill Lynch, they're not a fully licensed bank because that limits growth, and the business still wants to grow quickly, and that's where the value is, I think, long term. But these online banks are really kind of the future, and I think people will decide which bank they want to go to match what their value proposition is. Some people want the highest interest rate possible. Others care about planting trees, like what we offer on our debit card, and trying to match their actual social values with their money. And I think that, one of the more interesting things that I found out about banks were when we started this business was you have no idea where your money goes at night. So these banks are lending your money to, fossil fuel companies, gun companies, private prison companies, and most people don't realize that. And when you explain to them that that's the case, people are sometimes horrified, and they're like, "Whoa, how did this happen? Like, I don't want to be involved in that." And that's where Aspiration comes in, that we can give people that care about that a place to bank.
I love it. So I've actually got a banker on my wall. I've got that's AP Giannini here, who started Bank of Italy, which later became Bank of America.
Amazing.
And why he's my favorite entrepreneur of all time, and why? Because he was the first bank to lend money to immigrants. And he lent money based off a handshake and a look in the eye, if you can imagine that for a bank, and judged the man by the calluses that he had on his hands. Funded the Golden Gate Bridge, which I know your grandfather had a hand in actually.
Yeah, my great-grandfather. Yeah, that's what brought my family to the Bay Area. And actually behind me, I have photos of the bridge when it was being constructed. So
what would you say, like, what's your message to entrepreneurs who are trying to do good, trying to make money, might be struggling, trying to find their path? Like, what is it? Encouragement? Is it they're missing a skill set? Like, what do you think most entrepreneurs need to hear? That maybe they can qualify for VC, but most people won't. So what do you think is missing for most entrepreneurs?
I think from what I've seen, it's passion to really get to that point. A lot of people give up really early. I've gone through a lot of stresses over the last few years trying to build businesses. It's great, but it's also terrifying at the same time, and you're going to get knocked down. At a certain point, you got to believe in what you're building, like obsessively. Maybe you're the blind man on the block and you're the only one that believes it, but you got to really believe in what you're doing. And I think a lot of guys give up early, or they just don't really, they're not as committed to what they want to accomplish. And if I looked at some of our best CEOs and some of our best founders, they would literally put their life on the line to keep the business going. Leverage themselves, put whatever they have to do to make sure the business is successful. And, that kind of persistence and passion is something you want to build is key.
And so do you think people are just chasing a trend? Because
definitely at certain points with like apps and all these companies that have raised a lot of venture funding or haven't. It's like everyone and their mother tried to start a company after Facebook, which is great because that creates a whole new market. And, some ideas will work, some ideas won't. But that's not sort of the mission statement in founders that I look for. And I think it's really it's passion to building what they care about. And also, I love what I do. You must love what you do. So if you're a founder and you love the business you're building, I think you'll be ultimately way more successful. If you don't really like it or don't really understand what you're building, it's a lot harder.
And so how do you suss that out? Because that's kind of hard to see in a business plan, right? Is it going to dinners with them? Like, how do you try to suss that out?
It's spending as much time with them as possible. And I think you can identify traits in people. And when they're starting to build a business very early on, you can really see them and how they act, how they pitch, how they talk about their business, the way they are around other people, employees in the business, even how they've set up the capital structure. If there are 3 partners, if it's an equal partnership or if one owns more equity than the other, those are all things you look for early on because you want to see how these guys are going to work together or how they will be able to build something.
Is there anything that you like they have to do? Like they have to go to dinner with you, or they have to go to a Dodgers game or something? Like they have to do something with you as
Well,
part of the process?
I'm a Giants fan, so let's
Oh,
not
okay.
talk about
Okay, we can't
Dodgers.
talk
But
Dodgers. Okay, forget the Dodgers. Forget those guys. Giant. But you live in
yeah,
LA.
I do live in LA.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but no, I was, and it's not really that I have to have a meal with them or have to, you know, go to dinner with them. It's more just like talking to them like this, like getting to understand what makes them move, what makes them want to create, and try to help them develop ideas and help them, keep their path. Because it's hard to stay focused. There's a lot of distractions when you're a young founder. You have to raise capital, you have to manage the business, you have to hire people. Raising capital is a full-time job. And when you have to also run a business, it makes it a lot more difficult. So that's where partnerships are really important. When I look at the best companies, there are 2 or 3 founders, and they could end up really helping each other as the business scales because one can focus more on capital, the other one can focus more on running the business. It's hard to do 2 things at once.
Is it too soon? Like, is there a moment where it's too soon to raise capital, where you tell companies like you got to go back and get some more momentum and actually build something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what kind of sector they're in. Like in the banking space, it's very expensive to start a banking platform, right? You can't just wake up one morning and be like, hey, you have to go through, the SEC, FINRA, and all the regulatory framework. But I mean, if you start a great idea tomorrow off of something that's easy to build, sure. I mean, I've been pitched before and have invested in something really early on, and other things take a long time.
How much do you think geography plays into it? So, like, you want to invest in LA companies or California companies versus New York or international?
I think it's changed a lot. I think if you weren't in Silicon Valley, it was really hard to raise capital.
Mm-hmm.
I think New York has become kind of a venture hotspot. So has Los Angeles. So has Austin. I mean, and there's a lot of founders now that focus in certain areas to actually get their funding. Like LA companies are like, hey, we're going to become the next big LA business. We want LA investors because we're going to help out the community. We're going to hire more people. We're going to build something. And I think that a lot of venture capital firms in certain regions want to back companies that are based in their city. And that's something that we definitely look at too. Like being based in LA, we want to see LA businesses be successful. And if we can help them from, at the beginning, we're very interested in that.
So my audience is mostly American. I'm physically based here in Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
And like 20% of LA is Canadians. People kind of come down. So if an entrepreneur is looking at that for the success of their business, either raising capital or finding partners or just talent hub, how much do you think location actually plays into it?
I mean, it's pretty hard talent-wise to sometimes in certain areas to get them to come down. I mean, when Aspiration was starting up, it wasn't the easiest thing to get engineering talent because most of it was in the Bay Area and they didn't want to leave, their home if they had a family there or just comfort of living. But it's really changed. Like LA now has become a big hub for that. I think thanks to Snapchat and some of the other big tech companies that have been based in LA that have brought talent down. But yeah, no, I think from a talent-wise, especially engineering talent, they can be very picky about where they want to go because there's not that many amazingly talented engineers, and they're very sought after.
Right. I mean, and San Francisco to LA at least is in the same state. What
Totally.
if you're in like Minnesota or something?
I mean, now with the world that we live in with this and Zoom, you can be anywhere. So, I mean, I think that's also going to change a lot how people are working for these tech companies because you could work remotely. I mean, Facebook, for example, is like, you don't have to go back to the office if you don't want to. And I think that that's going to create much more opportunity for people in the venture landscape and venture-backed businesses because you'll be able to work anywhere. Like I could be working with a French company and talk to them, every day via this and be in the same room just like I am with my partner based on Zoom. So I think that this whole culture through video chat and video conferencing is only going to become bigger and bigger, I think. I mean, people are going to be very comfortable doing this. Like I'm sitting at home right now and I can talk to you and I've had a whole full day of meetings already.
Yeah.
I don't have to commute. I don't have to get in the car.
Do you think that changes the funding landscape? Like, would you now more consider investing into a Minnesota company or a Toronto company or a London company if it made sense? Or it's like, nah, I still want to be California?
No, I mean, I think we're very opportunistic. I mean, if there's a great idea and there's a great leadership team, why wouldn't I invest somewhere else? And if there's a company in Istanbul or a company in the Philippines, like I'll go there. I love to travel. I mean, that's been for me one of the hardest parts of COVID is the lack of travel, because I was brought up in Switzerland. My mom's French. I spent a lot of my life in Africa growing up. So I miss that. And I miss being able to meet with people and shake someone's hand and talk to them and look at them in the eye and say, hey, like, are you really building this business? Tell me about it. Because this is still great, but it's not the same. I think the physical touch of meeting somebody and, hearing them speak and how their body language is very different, especially when you're negotiating. I haven't negotiated yet over Zoom. So that'll be coming up soon, I imagine.
So it'll be fun. I'm excited to see how that goes. It's interesting to see how many businesses do make the shift and who do go back to meeting in person versus just abandoning their offices completely.
California's been a bit more strict than other places during all this, but in Europe, pretty much everything's back on. I mean, people are meeting in person, business deals are happening, offices are opened. LA is still pretty shut down to a certain point.
Why was it so important to you to create a fund to do good? So many people have raised funds, and entrepreneurs, I think, are going to solve all the world's major problems anyways.
Yeah.
And so it's part of what VCs do is invest in entrepreneurs who go off and change the world. But most VCs don't make that their core tenet that, no, this company has to do good. Why does that mean so much to you?
I mean, I care deeply about values, and I also think that that's the biggest opportunity, because in all the businesses that we've invested in, especially Aspiration, to understand how much customers care about their values and not being able to find businesses that match their values. So I think that if you can create that, you've created a niche for yourself, and it's still a very large market. And I think that's what we see as the future, as being able to match people with their values, match businesses with their values, match concepts with their values. And I think that when I look forward 5 to 10 years, I think that's only going to become more and more in picture and in vogue, because founders are going to understand that. They're going to need to build businesses to match that. Already, if you look just over the last 6 months, ESG and social impact, like those were tenets in people's minds. But in the last 6 months, there's been such a rapid move towards that. If you look at big firms like BlackRock starting an ESG fund, or people caring about how their employees and diversity requirements, like that's only going to get bigger and bigger. And I think we were lucky that we saw it kind of early on, and we've been able to back companies earlier on with those vision and that sort of mindset. And I think that that'll give us a lot of legitimacy moving forward. And I think that's something that people that try to compete with us with that will have a harder time, because it's maybe not as honest, that they just kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and we've been able to show it.
It feels like a strategy as opposed to being an actual core value.
No, it's still a core value, because it's something that we deeply care about. Like,
not for you.
You meant as, yeah.
Yeah, it's 100%. Okay, let's add this environmental fund because that looks sexy and it's a good strategy. But like at the core, we're still going to do all this other stuff.
100%. And like that'll just become like a check mark. Like, do you offer ESG? Sure, we offer ESG. And you're already seeing that, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger. And companies are going to have to get into it, otherwise they're going to be left behind. But it's hard for big behemoth companies, especially if you take the big banks. Like, they can't stop lending to fossil fuels. They can't stop overdraft fees. They can't stop certain things like that, because it would completely affect their business in the long term. So that's where I think you can find companies that kind of are the in-between that can really create that and create those businesses, and either will get acquired down the road, or hopefully standalone companies that can go public and really revolutionize an industry. And is there a name for those companies? Like, if it's guns or oil, like, is there a category that they can be lumped into? You mean fossil, like the sort of the bad companies people? Yeah, exactly. Quote, is there a name for them? Not really. Okay. It's just more of like, what you care about, like, because people have different values. Some people might value certain things versus others, and that's why there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to be out there to create different things. Do you know what percent, like, Bank of America's business might be tied to that kind of stuff? I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's probably pretty substantial. Significant. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I know we're kind of getting close to the end. A bunch of people are going to see this on my YouTube channel when we download it and edit it and put it up, that haven't heard of you before. Are you now trying to be the face? Are you trying to just spread the message? Like, what's the thing that you're working on now to make you want to come more public and start spreading the message? Honestly, it's just about like building great businesses and being around great founders. I think that we want to build companies that create that positive impact, and we've done that with Aspiration as a starter block, but that's what we want to be involved in, and that's what I want to be aligned with. And if through marketing my fund and Aspiration and other things like that, we can help those businesses grow, that's kind of the key for me.
I love it. So for people who are learning about you for the first time and want to dive deeper into your world, where do you want them to go next?
agopartners.com, or check out Aspiration. Open a bank account. Why not, right? It'll change your life.
Get into the neo-banking. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Alex, man, thank you for the time, the energy, the love, joining me from your home, different country. Appreciate all the wisdom and the nuggets, and super pumped for everything you're building. And I learned a lot today too. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Take care.
All right. Much love.